now the conversation has shifted to, well, these estimates that Sac State has been publicly putting out there after this announcement of their projected revenue. Is that number exaggerated? Is it accurate? Is it not? We are joined right now by CBS Sports writer Richard Johnson, who wrote an article on CBS Sports called "What is the Economic Impact of Sacramento State's Bold FBS Move? Financial Estimates Raise Questions." It's a really interesting, in-depth financial article that talks about the estimations and some numbers that were confusing. But since then, the Collegiate Consulting, who came up with these estimates and these numbers for Sac State, is now kind of going back and forth a little bit. It's an interesting conversation, so we're happy to bring Richard Johnson in as we're figuring this out in real time. Richard, we appreciate you being part of the show. First off, my friend, regardless of everything, really interesting, in-depth article. What drew your attention to this specifically, and what is your, at this point, major takeaway from just this entire situation surrounding Sac State moving to the MAC?
Well, the major takeaway, as it is specific to kind of this $975 million number of economic impact over 5 years, as the school claims, it's the thing that I want everybody to understand about this. That is a projection, and that is a glass half, maybe glass 7/8 full projection. Because at the end of the day, if my accountant projects that I'm going to make $10 million next year, that's all well and good. But whether I make $10 million next year is to be determined. And so at the end of the day, what Sac State did here is no different from what professional sports teams do when they're trying to get a stadium. I'm sure the Kings probably did this when they built Golden One Center, for instance. They tried to get a study to show potential economic impact. And what Sacramento State did, both Dr. Luke Wood, the president of the school, and the school in a press release, is they mischaracterized, and that is according to Russell Wright, who's the CEO of Collegiate Consulting, they mischaracterized an FBS projection line in a study that they commissioned Collegiate Consulting to do over 5 years. It is a mischaracterization of what the study was supposed to do. The study was not commissioned or did not intend to project out over 5 years. But Sacramento State did that. Dr. Luke Wood did in a tweet, and they did in a press release. And so what they've done today in the tweet that you were talking about, Collegiate Consulting, where they reaffirm, is they got with a PR firm and they spun it based on semantics to try to, again, say that, and in their tweet it says, the potential for 5-year projections approaching that number. It is all about projection, potential. It's all these things that say, well, yeah, maybe we can make $975 million, or generate, I should say, $975 million of economic impact over 5 years. But until they come back in 5 years and show me how every single dollar that they earn in media visibility or what have you from playing a bunch of MAC football games gets to $975 million of economic impact over 5 years. If I'm a Sac State student, Sac State faculty member, Sacramento business person, or Sacramento resident, I would be extremely skeptical when a public institution tells me that they can generate nearly $1 billion over 5 years by getting into the Mid-American Conference to play football.
Richard Johnson from CBS Sports is joining us. He wrote the article breaking down the overestimations from Sac State based off of the company, I want to make sure I get it right, the Collegiate Consulting company that did estimates for Sac State of what their revenue could potentially look like. This is a really in-depth article. And Richard, I'm going to be trying to walk through this with you in real time. So for context purposes, I'm the kind of guy that gets help from much smarter people than I am to do taxes and stuff like that. So walking through numbers of the millions to billion dollar range of what we're talking about here, it gets pretty crazy, and the in-depthness of this article that you dive into kind of illustrates that. But just to hold my hand and walk with me through this and along with our listeners, essentially this this company, the Collegiate Consulting company, projected a number, which they now are saying in a tweet as of 9 o'clock this morning, that they stand by $194 million of year one economic impact for Sac State with their jump to the MAC. And then it sounds like Dr. Wood and Sac State then took that number, multiplied it by 5 to project what the 5-year window would look like, that 5-year economic impact. Is that correct? Am I on the right page there?
That is exactly what happened. Russell Wright, the CEO of Collegiate Consulting, told me he did not know that the school was going to do that, extrapolate the number that he gave them over 5 years. He did not know that was going to be what the school did, but that is what they did. And that 195 number, just to zero in on it, the vast majority of that 195 number comes from $120 million of broadcast exposure impact. That is the line item that they draw that from on a spreadsheet that is in the Collegiate Consulting report. Now, that $120 million number comes from a formula that Collegiate Consulting did where they made some estimates on what Sac State's TV ratings could be for 6 MAC football games on linear television, so ESPN, ESPN2, what have you. They did that based on games played by Toledo, Western Michigan, and Central Michigan. What I did is I went and I found ratings for every single regular season TV game by a MAC team last season. Right now, Sac State is not eligible for the postseason, and Athletic Director Mark Orr told me that he's undecided on whether they will take legal action to try to get postseason eligible. So in any event, Collegiate Consulting's report spat out $120 million in broadcast exposure impact. When I sent Collegiate Consulting report more TV ratings, they baked it into their formula, and they came out with $80 million in broadcast exposure impact. Now, $80 million is sure still a lot, but it ain't 120. So, again, what I want to impress on anybody who reads this story, on anybody who listens to this radio interview, and anybody at Sacramento State or in that orbit, everything about what they are saying is potential. It is all could. It is maybe. It is projection, and it is all glass half full.
Richard, sorry, Kayla. Do you think is Sac State being misled here? Is that what you think is happening by this consulting company, that they're being thrown inaccurate numbers and being misled by these numbers?
I think there's a little bit to that because at the end of the day, and this is where we get to the glass half full stuff. What happens if Sac State is 3-9 and they're hosting a 4-8 Kent State team? Like, what do you think the economic impact is going to be of that? Nobody's going to watch that game relative to if Sac State is, 12-0 and, gunning for a college football playoff run. There's so much about this that is wishful thinking and wish casting. And again, glass half full. So I think there's a little bit of both. I think some of the underlying data that undergirds some of these projections is a little faulty. And I also think all of it is, again, kind of that glass half full, extremely optimistic projection on all potential.
Richard Johnson, writer at CBS Sports, joining us this morning on the Matt and Kayla Show. Richard, in the article also, we talk about, and we've talked about this on our show, the move being pricey. You mentioned the $5 million fee paid to the NCAA, the $18 million paid to the league, with $6 million, by the way, due up front, and then obviously the travel costs of the league's opponents covered by the Hornets. I know Sac State administrators have said that none of the money to cover the school's entrance fee to the MAC or NCAA will be covered by students or, the school's general fund. Is that something that you found accurate?
I did not dive into that specifically. Mark Orr did tell me that. Athletic Director Mark Orr did tell me that, and that's in the story. So, for now, I think you kind of take them at their word for that, and then you try to check up on that as that fee is paid. Now, to be honest with you, I know that the covering the travel fee thing is kind of a headline grabby thing. Mm-hmm. That is not actually unprecedented. Hawaii actually did this for a while when they were in the Mountain West as a football-only member. And I do think that there's an allocation that Sac State would have had to do anyway for their opponents if they were going to play as an FCS independent, which it seemed like they were intended to do. So while the travel coverage thing, I understand, is it takes a bunch of people by surprise, that's not actually really the thing that turned my head about all of this. The $5 million NCAA fee, that is what it is. North Dakota State paid it too, just the other day, or will pay, I should say, in the future here. When they come up, that number, $5 million by the NCAA, actually is significantly increased from what it used to be, because the NCAA was, in part, I believe, trying to discourage teams moving up from FCS to FBS with a big price tag. And at the end of the day, that $18 million to the MAC, if I'm the MAC, sounds pretty good to me. It didn't sound like Sac State had any other legitimate options to find a way to get up to FBS once the NCAA denied them to come up to FBS as an independent. So at the end of the day, if I'm the MAC and you're telling me they're going to pay me $18 million over 5 years and I can distribute it as I see fit, I assume, to my member schools, that sounds pretty good to me.
Richard, kind of pulling back a little bit from the specifics of the financial aspect of this story to what Sac State is trying to do, if you're comfortable just kind of giving your general opinion on this big jump that they're trying to make from the FCS to the FBS. They've spearheaded the movement. There were no invitations. They called their shot over a year ago when they declared that they were leaving their conference, and they risked being an independent, and they obviously did enough to attract the MAC or throw enough money at the MAC to make this a possibility. What do you make of the big swing that Sac State is making with their football program to make this jump to the FBS? And at least it seems like they've been successful in doing it.
Yeah, I think they, like North Dakota State, in the last kind of few weeks or last couple months, kind of realized that it was a little bit, I don't want to say easier, but a little bit more straightforward to get up right now to FBS if certain conditions were met. And obviously, in Sac State's case, essentially, I should say, paying your way. I also think that, and this is the funny thing, like, I don't necessarily think Sac State's going to come up here and fail in the MAC. I mean, at the end of the day, the bottom of the MAC pretty much is FCS quality football, if we're going to be honest. The bottom of the MAC is not good. And so I do believe, armed with, I believe Mark Orr told me, right around $3 million in NIL rev share funds in the near future, so they say, I think they can come up and be competitive in the MAC, which is kind of the funny thing about all of this. I don't think any of this reporting that I'm doing here is going to get them kicked out of the MAC or not allowed in. That's not the purpose of why I did this at all. The purpose of why I did this is to just say, $975 million is a pretty big number. Is that true? ? And that kind of was the guiding light of all I did and all the digging that we did on this last week.
Richard, is it maybe why some people, and again, there's a lot of people here that are excited about moving up to the FBS, and rightfully so, right? We're in a pretty decent sized market here in Sacramento, and maybe they can get more into the college football scene. But with the timing, I think that's also the thing that maybe had people turn heads a little bit, was like the timing of all this.
Yeah, it's definitely quick timing. I think that, I spoke to head coach Alonzo Carter for this story, and I think he was expecting it to be 2027. I think, until recently, I think Mark Orr was, quite frankly, expecting it to be 2027. Some timelines sped up here on this to get them in 2026. I imagine, from a strict football discussion, I should say, I imagine that they may have some depth concerns just because they sort of built a team for what was assumed to be an FCS slate, but they do have the resources to get to 105 scholarships. That's what Coach Carter told me. Yeah, they may have some depth concerns kind of late in the season or what have you, but I do not expect them to look out of place on the football field in their MAC schedule.
Richard, we'll wrap up with this, and we appreciate you taking the time while this story continues to progress here. Tell me if this is an overgeneralization, because I see essentially the feedback from Sac State fans is, regardless of what the estimates are, there's no way that this isn't going to be a economic boom for this franchise, or for college football, Sac State football here in the California capital. They're making this jump. They're investing a lot of money, obviously, and paying a pretty hefty price in order to make this jump. But there's more than enough reason to believe or be optimistic about the return being worth the initial price tag, in addition to the benefits for the team, the competition level, potential bowl games down the road. Is that an overgeneralization, or in your mind, is it, regardless of these estimates, this is going to be something that should be financially positive and lucrative for a team that's making a big leap?
I would be very skeptical of that claim.
Okay.
Winning is not a business model in college athletics. And if you don't win, things can get pretty squirrely from a financial perspective. Now, again, I just want to be clear. The funny thing is I actually expect them to be fairly competent in the MAC. Again, that's more of a treatise on the MAC than it is about Sac State football. And I understand why people are optimistic. I understand why people are excited. That's all well and good. But if you get into this league and you do 3 straight seasons of 2-10 against a league that you have absolutely no regional ties with, excitement's going to wane pretty quickly. And again, I understand why everybody's glass half full, why everybody is optimistic about this, deservedly so. It's a big deal for this school. But let's see the long tail of how this is going to work out before everybody says that this is going to make this school a whole lot of money. Because a school like Kent State, which you are now in a league with, that has been historically terrible, is not swimming in it. And when Sac State goes on the road, for instance, to Kent State or some of these other places, you're going to see how lucrative football really is when you're not successful.
Richard, we appreciate you making the time, my friend, and this article is available for you to read. A lot of numbers, goes really in depth on what Richard heard, the estimations. So appreciate you again coming on the show on such short notice. I only got in contact with Richard this morning, and we made this happen. So I appreciate you. Good luck with the continuation of this story. I'm sure there's going to be more information to come as we get closer to this jump actually being made a reality. Thanks for making the time.
Thanks, y'all. Have a great day.
Thanks, Richard.
That is CBS Sports writer Richard Johnson, who wrote the now, I don't know if we can call it contentious, or it's definitely a hot topic conversation that's happening among social media circles in Sacramento right now, especially with now the consulting company coming out and standing by their number. And Richard is directly saying that the CEO of the consulting company told him that he doesn't know where they got that, or they overcharacterized or overestimated that number. Look, I am not smart enough to financially understand what to do with $900 million or how you got to that number necessarily. I have watched this entire Sac State process play out. I've watched Sac State, I think, sometimes put the cart before the horse. I've also watched them call their shot, and here they are. They got there. They got the MAC. They got to the FBS. So this is, I think we're reaching, this is so unprecedented that we're seeing real things react to and scramble in real time. You hear Richard saying he is skeptical about this being an ultimately positive thing for Sac State. I'm on the side of, I don't know how this is going to be a overtly negative thing, Sac State going to the FBS. I do think there is going to be positive financial ramifications from it, or a benefit from it. But that's coming from someone who's a radio host, not an economics major.
Yeah, I think it's our job on the radio locally to give both sides if there's 2 sides to a story. And right now, if you have somebody coming out who is, like Matt said, a lot smarter when it comes to digging into numbers and doing the research behind numbers, I think it's interesting to at least put it out there for the future if you do keep monitoring like what happens with the situation. Because again, this is a 5-year deal. Mm-hmm. They're going to be given time to build their name and to hopefully find success. And if you're a Sac State Hornets fan, you should be excited about this. You absolutely should be. But there are always risks to things like this. And just at least having someone come out there and be like, look, the numbers might not be exactly what are projected. I'm not going to hold on to something too tightly when it comes to projection of numbers. Anything can happen every year. Right. Something can change in terms of that. But I do think you have to be cautious about things could go in a different direction in the future. There's been plenty of FCS schools that have hopped up to FBS that have hopped back down to FCS.
I guess I'm going to go with the optimistic side. I believe this is going to be a total.
And you should if you're a fan.
I think this is going to be a total win for Sac State football. I think you have to put your neck out there if you really want to succeed. You have to.
Right.
You can't win the game if you're not putting yourself in it.
And that's the thing. That's why the numbers. Do they really? I mean, the projection versus what they exactly are. Look, you could split hairs on that. That to me, they just felt like they needed to make the move. And this was the right time to make the move because they had the opportunity. The spot was open. And if you keep waiting sometimes, you're never going to get that opportunity.
Yeah. Well, sorry, Kyle. And even if you're not swimming in the revenue over the next 5 seasons or whatever it is, you're putting yourself out there. You play through the obligation that you have to the MAC. Maybe you're competitive. Hopefully you're competitive.
Richard Johnson said he thought that they were going to be competitive.
Sac State has every intention to be competitive, and I
right.
believe they would put their money where their mouth is in that sense too, because the one thing they don't want to do is now have all this national attention of this big move and then embarrass themselves.
Yeah,
they're not going to do that. They're putting their necks out on the line. So I believe that aspect. And look, again, maybe financially they don't get the best case scenario short term, but now that you're going to have 5+ years of experience in the FBS, now you have an even better resume to go to the Mountain West or go to the Pac-12 or whatever the hell, and say, hey, we want to move a little bit closer to home, but now we have the body of work behind us. Maybe we have a stadium situation in place by that time. You're buying yourself time.
Yeah.
And I don't see the overt risk necessarily in doing that. Maybe the numbers are too optimistic for someone like Richard, who is a journalist who is paid to be skeptical in a way, I suppose. For me, I mean, I'm intrigued, and we'll see how it plays out.
Well, as being the jerk back here who does have an economics degree.
Oh, good for you.
I will say that the one apprehension I would have in having cause for pause with this whole situation is just if it doesn't work out, like, because they're going to have to put more money in to upgrade the stadium and do all this, pay the fees, all the stuff like that. If this doesn't work out, say the updated projection of $80 million is actually $40 million, and then interest does wane, and by year 4, you're not even seeing that level of economic impact like Richard outlined at the end. If that doesn't happen and you do lose money on it, where that money deficit is going to be made up is either some sort of privately financing. We know they have their partnerships with Wilton Rancheria and everything else, or it's going to come from public money. So that's the risk that they are assuming, is that the risk they're taking is either with someone else's money or with potentially public money that comes from things like student fees and everything else. That is the main risk.
Because right now that's not part of it.
Yes.
Right?
Well, at face value. But when at the end of year 3 you come back and you're in the red, or your line items are in the red, then you're going to have a different conversation.
Not to mention there is the stadium element of this too, which is separate but also joined. Like, is it Cal Expo? Is it like, what are they doing?
So that's not even been decision-wise made on where this would go.
Correct.
Right.
From what I understand. Yeah. Again, this is moving quickly and a lot of moving parts, and there's a reason why this doesn't happen very often, because it's convoluted as hell.
Oh, yeah.
But it's a lot of money. That's all we know. It's a lot of money, and how does Sac State get into the green, for lack of a better term?